40 years ago, in the heart of downtown Calgary, members of the Baptist Church crossed paths with someone experiencing homelessness.
Moved by compassion, they felt called to serve and gave him a hot meal and a warm place to stay. From that moment of humble beginnings, the mustard seed took root.
Since then, we have helped thousands of people, made positive changes in their life as we have expanded our programs and services to 7 cities across Western Canada. Over the years, we have worked alongside countless individuals, providing shelter, housing, food, clothing, wealth and wellness support, employment assistance, and more. We met our community where they are at and work to provide resources to improve their life.
The mustard seed is more than a shelter. It's a place of resilience. It's hope grown.
In bustling cities, homelessness is a visible reality woven into the fabric of daily life. You might pass by shelters, encounter people on sidewalks, or notice tent communities tucked in corners. But as you leave the urban sprawl and venture into rural areas, this issue seems to vanish from sight. Yet, just because it's hidden doesn't mean it's gone. I'm Drew Anweiler, the Director of Quantitative Measurement and Strategy here at the Mustard Seed, and one of the voices behind Homegrown. Welcome to our podcast, where we share stories of compassion and community. In this episode, we dive into the hidden world of rural homelessness, a silent crisis shaped by scarce resources, vast distances, and persistent stigma. It's a reality far removed from the urban experience, yet just as pressing. Join us as we uncover the stories and lives behind this issue. Our journey unfolds in 2 parts, starting with the rural communities of Red Deer and Kamloops, where we've been called to serve. What began as a single mission in Calgary has grown to include Edmonton, Red Deer, Kamloops, Medicine Hat, Grand Prairie, and most recently, Saskatoon. To understand the scope of rural homelessness the Mustard Seed addresses, let's start with how we came to serve these communities. Our expansion into rural Alberta and beyond wasn't a grand strategy. It was a response to calls for help, a commitment to meet needs, and a heartfelt embrace of new communities. In early 2016, we received a pivotal phone call from Loaves and Fishes, a beloved Red Deer nonprofit known for its school lunch program for vulnerable children. Nestled in central Alberta, Red Deer lies just off the province's busiest highway, linking Edmonton and Calgary, a hub for industry and transportation. According to the Alberta Treasury Board and Finance, Red Deer's population topped 112,900 in 2024, making it Alberta's 3rd largest city. With a 3.7% growth rate last year and 7.5% over 5 years, the city is expanding rapidly. But growth brings challenges. As more people flock to Red Deer, the need for affordable housing and social services surges, straining existing support systems. In this city that bridges rural and urban life, housing insecurity is both complex and deeply felt. To shed light on this, we turn to Byron Bradley, who brings 7 years of experience serving at the Mustard Seed's Red Deer location.
The Ministry Center in Red Deer became the Mustard Seed. It was formerly Loaves and Fishes on July 1st, 2016. Just 3 weeks earlier, I think it was June the 6th, I was a part of a project team that was looking at different responsibilities in the transfer of assets from Loaves and Fishes because they were unable to carry on operations. They couldn't raise the finances. And so it wasn't like a takeover and acquisition that could happen, in some scenarios with different organizations. This was a waving of the white flag. Would you be willing to come? And, it wasn't a part of our strategic plan at the time to grow to a new community. And so June 6th, 3 weeks before we open, I was asked just to go help find volunteers for the summer to serve meals. I'm like, I can do that. So I jumped in my car the next day at 5 o'clock in the morning and just drove to Red Deer. Called a couple people that I knew, only a couple. They actually didn't call me back. So I started cold calling people and some strangers and some pastors at churches. I'm like, what's your favorite Starbucks drink? And it literally was one to the next to the next. Oh, you should meet so-and-so, you should meet so-and-so. And the people that I got to meet in those first 5 days was unbelievable. And then 2 weeks later, Steve Weil, our CEO, said, would you commute to Red Deer for a year and would you oversee operations? And I said, I would love to do that. So I ended up staying 7 years and it was some of the best years of my life.
The decision to serve Red Deer came after prayerful reflection, a step taken with intention and care. Since then, we've been blessed to walk alongside this community, from serving warm dinners to delivering school lunches and supporting residents through daily struggles. Red Deer was our first rural calling, and it continues to shape the heart of our mission. We'll also hear from Laura, who with 8 years of experience fighting homelessness in Red Deer, offers deep insight into the unique challenges of rural communities. Here she is, sharing her perspective with one of our production team members.
So my name is Laura Giesbrecht, and I'm the Senior Director of Food Services. And on Friday, I will have been at the Mustard Seed for 8 years. So I actually started out at the Mustard Seed as the part-time admin assistant for our managing director here in Red Deer, Byron Bradley. And now I find myself being the Senior Director of Food Services, and I've had so many other roles along the way. So when I think about my journey as a whole, it has been one of growth, huge growth, not only in my understanding of homelessness and poverty, but also growth for myself as a person and as a professional. And it has been this incredible way for me to live out my faith every day at work and an opportunity to do the things that I'm really passionate about.
So you're based in Red Deer. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what homelessness is like in Red Deer, because I imagine it's a bit different from a bigger city.
I would say that there would be similarities, obviously, but then there would be things that are very different. So when I started working here, we had 144 individuals who were experiencing homelessness in Red Deer. And our last point in time count from last year, there are now 766 people experiencing homelessness in Red Deer that were counted. So even in the amount of time that I've been here, the poverty and homelessness landscape in Red Deer has changed dramatically. And so I think some of the things that are different in a smaller city as opposed to our larger centers would be access to different services. There are less services in a smaller community like Red Deer than there are in a larger center like Edmonton or Calgary. And it can be easier to burn bridges with the service community here and, to be able to be banned from services and have that impact your day-to-day life in a different way than being able to navigate a larger landscape like Calgary or Edmonton, where if you get banned from this shelter, maybe you could go to this one over here, where in Red Deer there are two. And our shelter is a dry shelter where we don't have guests who are using substances. And so it changes your access to services in these smaller centers. And I think it also allows for more hidden homelessness, where maybe those numbers are even greater, but it's easier to maybe couch surf for a while and kind of sneak under the radar that way. And then because it is a little bit smaller, maybe sometimes it has a different, safer feel, and then guests would feel more inclined to make encampments and things like that. I think that landscape is different here than what I've experienced in Edmonton and Calgary. Actually, I remember one of the first times that I went to Edmonton and I saw the tent city there. I actually had to pull over because I just was crying because it broke my heart to see the difference, because it's just not as visible here as it is in, say, Edmonton. I would even go so far as to say that the topography of Red Deer makes that look different. Like, we have so many little wooded areas that I know people live in. It's not in your line of sight like it is in Edmonton, where they've taken over like whole city blocks. It's hidden in the trees here in Red Deer in a different way.
Given the differences between like Edmonton, Calgary, and a place like Red Deer, how does the Mustard Seed operate in Red Deer, like with specific respect to kind of like trying to navigate those differences?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I have really valued about the Mustard Seed, is that even as we are working to streamline our services, we still allow the strengths of each city to shine through. And we've done what we could to honor the relationships that each city has built with other social serving agencies and even government relationships, things like that. And so Red Deer, I would say that we operate as a 24/7 emergency shelter in conjunction with a community impact center. And a big part of that in my mind is the food services side of things. So we offer programming in the daytime for a lot of community members as well as our shelter guests. And a large part of that is access to different food services for individuals. So that combined with things like our diversion worker who helps to get people housed and to prevent people from being unhoused. We've got an advocate who works one-on-one with our guests to help them meet whatever challenges they're currently facing. We provide IDs for people, and she just really works one-on-one with people wherever they're at with whatever it is that they need. We have different art programs. We've had a doctor who would come on Wednesday evenings to see guests to help them overcome any kind of health challenges. We've had counseling services. We have had a physiotherapist come, even haircuts, providing haircuts for our guests. And we've had a local esthetician college come and, do hairstyles for people and do manicures. So like, it's really hard to sum up how we would operate in like a succinct way because there are so many different things that we do to impact the community that we serve. And we are so much more than a soup kitchen. And people can tend to think that when they hear about the mustard seed in Red Deer, that's what we are as a soup kitchen. And we are so much more than that.
What are some common challenges present for people experiencing homelessness and poverty in Red Deer? But also, what would be some common challenges that you face working at the Seed in Red Deer? Even just what you were just saying, like it sounds like it's a smaller staff, right? So like what are some of those challenges both for the clients we serve and for the organization serving them?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest issues that I see facing Red Deer right now is the lack of affordable housing and access to supportive and affordable housing for people. So I mentioned this diversion program that we have. It's really hard to find housing for individuals, for families, with the cost of rent being so high. It really poses a challenge. So I would say that for people experiencing homelessness and looking to be housed, that's one of the greatest challenges is the lack of affordable housing. In our smaller centers also, I could see it being a challenge to sometimes have access to services when there are a smaller number of individuals trying to help this growing population, like to have increased from 144 all the way up to 766 people experiencing homelessness. That's huge. And I could not confidently say that all of the social serving agencies in Red Deer have grown in a way that can meet that demand because our funding would be limited. And I don't see that it has grown that same amount to match that same need. So that would be one of those big challenges for like being from a smaller center for people. And then as far as poverty supports, there are a limited number of places where you can access food. Now that we provide 3 meals a day for our shelter guests, that really meets that need for those who are experiencing poverty that way. And I know that we're going to get to talk about our school lunch program. And so the reduction of poverty in a smaller center, I think, is harder because there are less service providers to help.
When you think of buying a house in Red Deer, you don't necessarily think about it being like priced out in the same way that you would in Calgary. But my understanding is it's just stock. Like there's just not the quantity of housing, right? So like you're already dealing with like a smaller pool than what you would be in a bigger city.
Yeah, I remember when we started our diversion program, this was a couple years ago when I was in a different role, and I really thought to myself, Kate, I am not going to approve anyone to be housed anywhere that I wouldn't want to live. And I was so disheartened to realize that that then meant there were maybe 1 or 2 apartments available for people, and that would likely be out of their price range. So it was very disheartening learning the full scope of the affordability of housing in Red Deer.
Hearing from Laura paints a picture of how complex and deeply rooted rural homelessness can be. But her experience is just one part of the story. Homelessness in rural areas has been referred to as a hidden crisis by the Calgary Herald. The 2023 Rural and Remote Alberta Provincial Estimation Report states that when it comes to homelessness and understanding its causes, the urban experience tends to dominate the conversation, mainly due to the visibility of individuals experiencing homelessness in urban centers. When we think of homelessness, it's often the most visible forms that come to mind. Someone sleeping on a bench or living in a tent. However, the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness reminds us that the issue is far more complex. Homelessness is defined not just by the absence of a home, but by the absence of stable, safe, permanent, and appropriate housing, or even the immediate means to obtain it. This includes sheltered homelessness, where individuals stay in emergency shelters, transitional homes, or safe houses for youth and survivors of violence. There's also unsheltered homelessness, often called sleeping rough, where people live without any physical shelter, in parks, alleys, or temporary structures. Perhaps the most overlooked is hidden homelessness. To better understand the real-world impact of hidden homelessness, we turn now to someone who's experienced it firsthand. In this next conversation, you'll hear from Sarah, a pseudonym used to protect her identity. Her story offers a glimpse into the quiet struggles so many face out of sight.
And then the person that I'd moved in with for a few months at Christmas was getting another apartment and wanted me to move into that apartment. And it seemed like things were okay. Yeah. So I moved in with him, but shortly after that, he got quite violent. He's a violent person. He's not an altogether bad person at all. I enjoy his company in many, many ways, but his solution to things is to hit, and that's not good. So then it got on, and I couldn't find another place to live, and I tried to go outdoors a few times, but I was unsuccessful, and I would drag my sorry back to the apartment, cold, needing shelter.
Small town homelessness is often hidden as individuals couch surf, double up with family, or stay in poor or unaffordable housing. The data shows that despite its hidden nature, rural homelessness is at rates equivalent or greater than urban centers. The 2023 Alberta Provincial Estimation Report found that there were around 395 respondents unsheltered or emergency sheltered. These respondents reported staying in emergency shelters, makeshift shelters such as vehicle, tent, or shack, and or staying in public spaces such as parks or sidewalks. In total, the report found there to be 2,429 housing insecure individuals in rural areas in Alberta.
Welcome to Shelter Take. I'm Ashley Campbell, and I work as a digital marketing specialist here at the Mustard Seed, and I'm another one of the voices behind Hope Grown. At the Mustard Seed, we know that people facing homelessness and poverty are first and foremost people, full of heart, humor, and hope. They've got stories to tell, dreams to chase, and moments that matter, just like all of us. So, we asked a few of our shelter guests one simple question. What's one small act of kindness that made a big difference in your day? Here's what they shared.
I would have to say that one small act of kindness that made a big difference in my day is a daily occurrence. It's just when I wake up in the morning and I wander to the bathroom, the staff are always just happy to see my face. And they're like, hey, good morning. It's nice to see you. Or even when I come home, they're like, oh, you're back. It's nice to see you. It's nice to feel welcomed and wanted somewhere. After just being in a rough spot, feeling like I'm cared about makes a huge difference in every one of my days. And I'm so grateful for it.
One small act of kindness that I see that makes a big difference in my day is no matter how bad of a day someone is having, there's always people cheerleading on the sidelines to help them out, to participate, to include them. And yeah, that's one thing that I really love seeing.
Brooke yesterday printed out some pictures for me of my dog and printed them out in colors so I could hang them up to remind me why I'm here and what I'm working towards and my goals, and printed out some other stuff for me so that I could, feel more situated and grounded and have more of a direction when I wake up in the morning instead of looking at a blank wall. So yeah, that was really nice, and yeah, she just been really kind to me.
Red Deer was the first community the Mustard Seed felt called to serve. 2 years later, in 2018, that call expanded to Kamloops. What began as a request for guidance from New Life Mission, a long-standing local organization seeking a new executive director, soon blossomed into something greater, a full merger. From there, our presence in Kamloops grew to include a day program, kitchen, mat program, men's recovery program, and thrift store. The Mustard Seed had officially operated the West End shelter since 2018, where we currently support 22 overnight shelter guests and 17 men engaged in long-term recovery. In 2022, with support from BC Housing, we added a 12-bed women-only sober living area. The same building also houses our health and wellness center, serving over 75 individuals each month with holistic, wraparound supports that connect them to broader community resources. Our core mission is to help individuals move from homelessness and poverty towards stability and renewed purpose. However, that mission had come under strain at the West End shelter. The integrity of our accredited recovery program has been challenged by environmental triggers that threaten participants' sobriety. The shelter saw an increase in overdoses and safety incidents, creating an increasingly hazardous environment for both guests and staff. In addition, safety concerns emerged for women in our sober living program, many of whom are escaping high-risk situations and require secure, trauma-informed spaces. Compounding these challenges was a lack of resources. The drop in services, though deeply needed, were not accounted for in the original budget and became unsustainable to operate. While these realities led to the difficult decision to close the day program, our commitment remains steadfast. We continue to serve the Kamloops community with greater intention, ensuring our programs remain safe, effective, and true to our calling to walk alongside those on the margins with dignity and care. Nestled in the Thompson-Nicola region, Kamloops is home to just over 109,000 people, according to BC Stats, with a modest growth rate of 1.74% over the past 5 years. But beneath this steady growth lies a pressing concern. The City of Kamloops' 2024 point-in-time count offers a 24-hour snapshot of the homelessness in the area, revealing a total of 313 individuals experiencing homelessness, of which 204 are sheltered, 89 are unsheltered, and 20 are hidden. This is not a new or isolated trend. Over the past decade, homelessness and poverty in Kamloops has surged by an alarming 229%. These numbers don't just reflect statistics. They represent stories of hardship, survival, and resilience. To help us better understand the landscape in Kamloops, we turn to Katie, a member of the Mustard Seed team since 2020, who's grown into a vital connector of people in the community. Here she is, in conversation with our production team.
I think there's a lot of differences. And I think one of the big things about Kamloops is, like, when you look at a map of BC, Kamloops is kind of in the interior of British Columbia. And so what that means is, like, it's kind of a hub for a lot of people. So a lot of people come to Kamloops from rural communities because this is one of the larger hospitals. There's a men's correctional prison here. There's different specialists in Kamloops. There's lots of reasons that someone would move to Kamloops or kind of transition to Kamloops. With that being said, Kamloops is often kind of called like a big town. So even though it's a city, it kind of feels like a town. There's a lot of people that have lived here for a really long time. It's really easy to get to know people. Even after like my first year living here, you start to recognize people. And what that means, I think, sometimes for people that are experiencing homelessness is they have more exposure. So the places that they might spend time, there's a lot more people seeing them, right? Versus if you think of like a big city, there's usually areas in a big city that are
maybe kind of known as a place that people would hang out, or like, you know, I think about in Vancouver, like East Hastings is like an area that people are like, oh, don't go to East Hastings, or like try to avoid that area. But here, like, there's not as many places for people to kind of like hide, quote unquote, right? So it's a lot more exposed, which then I think makes the public feel like the problem is bigger than sometimes it is, or it makes the resources feel like there's more people, but it's just kind of like it's really visible. So I think that's one of the big things. You know, Kamloops is a growing population, so we do have lots of people that move to Kamloops for jobs and then they're not able to find housing. Then they end up finding themselves in situations where they're unhoused. We have lots of people that are evacuated to Kamloops because of forest fires, and then they come here and then they're not able to return to their communities. We have people that come to Kamloops for the detox center and then end up staying in Kamloops. But there are lots of people that are from Kamloops that live here and are experiencing homelessness as well. So it's a really interesting mix.
Do you mind just like kind of blocking the landscape of it a little bit for us?
Yeah, for sure. So there is a detox center in Kamloops. It's called Day One Society. So they have a detox treatment center, and then they have a few kind of like residential treatment buildings that they operate. But the main one is called Phoenix Center, which is their detox center. And I believe there's maybe like 20 detox beds there. So when you think about like the population of Kamloops, I think, is over 100,000 now. And then having only 20 detox beds is like quite a barrier for a lot of people. So that service is like really needed in our community. And the challenge is that there's often not a ton of wraparound supports once someone goes to detox. So if someone is struggling with addiction, they go to detox and then they're there for, 5 or 6 days, and then they leave and they have nowhere to go or nowhere safe to go, right? That's where they're supported in their recovery journey. So, the mustard seed, a lot of our programs are abstinence-based. So that's something we can try to transition someone into that. But then as far as other services, there are a couple other shelter providers in town, but they all have kind of different lenses. So one is a little more housing focused, so getting people into housing because they have housing buildings already. And then another one is more mental health focused. So I would say there's probably mainly 4. The 4th one started as like a winter emergency response shelter and now has been transformed into a year-round shelter. So they're still, I think, a little more like grassroots, trying to figure out where they're headed. So yeah, it's kind of unique in that way that each shelter is a little bit different, but there's a huge gap in housing. Obviously, that's across Canada right now, but especially sometimes we feel that in Kamloops because, yeah, we have a lot of individuals experiencing homelessness and not a lot of places for them to transition. So I know like most shelters are usually like 95% capacity, and some people staying in shelters for significant amount of time, but no real next steps. So yeah, it's a big gap for sure.
I think too that's something a lot of people, especially in the bigger cities, don't think about when it comes to the smaller centers is like there's just simply less housing because you're a smaller center, right? So there's just simply less supply, which I always feel like is something kind of flies over people's heads.
Also the fact that homelessness is like more visible just because like in Vancouver, like that's a huge place and not every face is like sadly identifiable because it's just like such a large population. It's like easier to hide versus like in Kamloops, like that's my neighbor or my old neighbor.
Well, and even like Calgary has done such a good job of hiding it. Like we even have the bus service here because our shelter is in the southeast where it's you know, hidden. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, there's different challenges that people face in different cities. And I think one challenge in Kamloops as well is just like a lack of resources for certain things. I mean, yeah, like when I think about people experiencing homelessness, a lot of them first experienced homelessness when they were teenagers, right, or youth. And we don't really have a lot of services for youth in Kamloops. We have like one housing operator and then a couple other organizations that do like youth programming, but nothing really specific for youth. So yeah, it's really challenging sometimes to put yourself in someone else's shoes and imagine this is where you were. Or even just considering like someone who's maybe living in like Williams Lake, which is like 3 hours from Kamloops, which is very rural. Like they would probably come to Kamloops for more services, right? And we're already saying like there's not enough services here, but they're like, well, compared to what I just left, there's more here, right? So you can see how people kind of transition based on what they need.
What are some common challenges present for people experiencing homelessness and poverty in Kamloops? So yeah, less lack of resources. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, lack of resources, I think, is a big one. I think another one is just like community perception and lack of private spaces. I think like someone years ago made a comment to me about like, imagine if you had no home or no safe space to go, and all of your most like vulnerable moments are just in public, right? So like every emotional moment you have, every stressful moment, there's like no protection or safety. And so I think that there's a lot of individuals in Kamloops that feel that exposure. And I think there's a lot of frustration just with the community around homelessness because, again, it's like a small city, right? So we feel those things a lot more. And so I think that's definitely a big one as well that affects people experiencing homelessness.
I think that's something else people don't necessarily think about. Like when you see somebody having a time on the side of the street or whatever, like they don't have anywhere else necessarily to have that experience. So yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. What are we doing in Kamloops?
Yeah, so in Kamloops, we have right now 2 shelters. So in Kamloops, we run 2 shelters year round. So one is called the West End Shelter, which is a 24/7 shelter for men and women. And then we have a women's shelter that's called Harbor House. And so there's 12 beds for women there, and it's also 24/7. And then in the winter, we, for the past several years, have been running a winter shelter as well, which just closed on March 31st. I should also just put like a visual picture in your mind. We have one building on this one street called West Victoria Street. So both of those shelters that I mentioned are in that building. And then we also have a wellness center in that building. So the health and wellness program runs out of there throughout the week. And then on the top floor of that building, we have a recovery program for men. So there's 17 units for individuals working through their addiction journey. It's a year-long program with different built-in kind of community supports and programming. And then we also have a chaplain who's based out of that building as well. So we're offering spiritual care from that building. And then we have a thrift store. So we have a separate building with a thrift store that runs throughout the week, and all the proceeds from that store get reintegrated back into the programs that we run at the Mustard Seed. It's also an opportunity for some of our clients and residents to volunteer and to get some kind of employment experience, and just obviously volunteering is a good way to get back into the job world. And then we also have outreach workers as well that are based in that building, even though they're not really in the building very often because they're out doing outreach in the community. And then I also work above the thrift store. So we have a couple kind of admin staff in Kamloops as well. Yeah. And then we run some kind of other programs throughout the year, like the Gathering Place, which is a summer program where people experiencing homelessness can come and just get kind of like a safe space out of the hot weather. So we usually have like cooling tents, water bottles, different things to just keep people out of the heat in the summer with different staffing resources. And so that opens usually kind of the end of April and goes till September, October.
Well, and I love too, like the Gathering Place. I honestly wish we were able to do it across more of our sites because I feel like it's such a good touch point. Because Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like all of our services, like you can kind of get acquainted and kind of connect with them at the Gathering Place, but you're not facing the barriers of like, oh, I have a dog, I can't come into the shelter, or like things like that, you know? That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely like a low barrier program, which is really good. And there's not a lot of that in Kamloops. It's kind of like a drop-in style, right? So people can come as they want to, and there's not a ton of places like that for folks in Kamloops, which is unfortunate because you really do need a space to just be able to be and exist. So it's really important to have that for just like a sense of self, right? And a sense of community.
Hearing from Katie, Laura, and Byron helps paint the quieter, often hidden picture of rural homelessness. This has been part 1 of a 2-part journey exploring what the realities of folks experiencing rural homelessness looks like. You've been listening to Hope Grown, a podcast from the Mustard Seed. I'm Drew, and thank you for being part of this journey today. Be sure to subscribe and join us for the next episode, where we'll continue unpacking the Mustard Seed's rural outreach, this time in Medicine Hat, Grand Prairie, and Saskatoon. To learn more or to get involved, please visit theseed.ca. Until next time, remember, hope isn't just an idea, it's something we grow together.